Hello everyone and welcome back to another Ask a Witch. I'm going to just apologize for the very strange lighting in the workroom right now. The sun is setting and it's at a really steep angle coming in through the kitchen and it looks a little strange, I'm aware, but I only have a little bit today and I wanted to go ahead and film this anyway. As a reminder, Ask a Witch videos answer questions that we have been sent in on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, at our email address at staff@sanctumofthecraft.org, and basically wherever we answer those questions. And when we answer the questions, we tend to answer them from the perspective of our own particular style of witchcraft. As always, do what works for you. The question that I'm answering today was left on our Why I Use Human Bone video. Specifically, I mentioned that I use this particular piece of human bone as a seeing stone, a witch's eye, basically a seeing circle of some kind. And someone asked me, well, what's that? So I'm going to explain what it is historically, and then I'm going to talk about some variations on the concept, because this is distinctly a variation, except that it might not be a variation on history. So let's get into it and I'll explain what I mean. A hag stone, a witch's stone, sometimes they're called serpent's eggs, sometimes they're called snake's eggs. They have a bunch of different names in Welsh, in Scots Gaelic, even in Egyptian that I'm not going to try and pronounce right now, but which are commonly referred to as either adder stones, seeing stones, hag stones, witch's eyes, seeing eyes. There's so many different terms for this. Were originally naturally occurring stones with a hole running through them. What caused the hole had to have been something natural, and in certain traditions it has to be water, in which case this wouldn't count, because the reason this has a hole is because there was marrow and now there isn't. But the whole idea that it has to be water may not have been original to the cultures that the idea is found in. So various traditions think that it was actually saliva. So the idea is that an adder stone forms in the throat or mouth of a serpent, and that the hole is where they push their tongue through the stone that is forming over and over and over again. There are also ideas that it's actually the serpent's head that somehow becomes the seeing stone. There are also ideas that the hole comes from the bite of an adder. So there are so many different notions as to how the hole gets in the stone, and it wasn't always originally water. That's actually more modern than the original idea. Nowadays, they would say it has to be water and it can't have been caused by human intervention. You can't have placed the stone so that water runs through it. You can't have directed the water so it runs through the stone, and you can't have bored the hole yourself. That is sort of the modern witchcraft convention that you see in a lot of witchcraft circles. In history, according to the ancient Roman natural philosopher that we mention in so many of our history videos, Pliny the Elder, in his Naturalis Historia, did talk about adder stones being used by the Druids. Keep in mind that anything that Pliny the Elder wrote about the Druids is suspect. He was a Roman natural historian, and it's kind of like a an invading colonizer writing about any kind of oppressed, marginalized, invaded people. He had reasons to potentially alter what he was writing. He's also, by a lot of historians, considered to have been quite naive in that he was fooled about things by the people he was recording because they didn't really want to tell the truth to this fucker from the invading, conquering people. Not everybody was thrilled about the Romans. Imagine that. So anything that Pliny wrote about anybody should always be taken with a grain of salt. But that being said, he did describe rituals that the Druids allegedly conducted in order to acquire these adder stones and the magical properties that they supposedly ascribed to it. He wrote, and this is a translation, obviously, "There is a sort of egg in great repute among the Gauls, of which the Greek writers have made no mention. A vast number of serpents are twisted together in summer and coiled up in an artificial knot by their saliva and slime, and this is called the serpent's egg. The Druids say that it is tossed in the air with hissings and must be caught in a cloak before it touches the earth. The person who thus intercepts it flies on horseback, for the serpents will pursue him until prevented by intervening water. This egg, though bound in gold, will swim against the stream, and the Magi are cunning to conceal their frauds. They give out that this egg must be obtained at a certain age of the moon. I have seen that egg as large and as round as a common-sized apple, in a checkered cartilaginous cover, and worn by the Druids. It is wonderfully extolled for gaining lawsuits and access to kings. It is a badge which is worn with such ostentation that I knew a Roman knight, a Viscontian, who was slain by the stupid Emperor Claudius, merely because he wore it in his breast when a lawsuit was pending." Because keep in mind, Roman law had some really strict ideas about when witchcraft or sorcery or pharmacon was permitted and when it was not. And one of the things you weren't allowed to use witchcraft for was to interfere with legal proceedings. So keep in mind that, yeah, that was an executable offense. When we talk about the execution of people for witchcraft, a lot of the times in Rome, it was you used it to interfere with an election, you used it to interfere with a legal proceeding. There were other things you were allowed to use witchcraft for, but not those. In Welsh mythology, and I'm going to mispronounce this because I don't speak Welsh, the Glain Nader or Main Magi of Welsh folklore is very closely connected to this idea of the adder stone. It also is created by a congress of snakes, and it's supposed to occur in spring, but most auspiciously on May Eve. Although not named as Glain Nader, magic stones that are said to have the same properties of these super fancy adder stones also appear frequently in Welsh mythology and folklore. In the Mabinogion, translated into English in the mid-19th century by Lady Charlotte Guest, there is mention of such stones on 2 occasions in the story of Peredur, son of Aethelwulf, Percival in the Arthurian cycle. In a departure from various other versions of Percival in the story of the Grail, in this story he is given a magical stone that allows him to see and kill an invisible creature called the Andak. Adank? Now I have a weird song from my childhood playing in my head. In another tale, Owain, or the Lady of the Fountain, the hero Owain Mab Urien is trapped in the gatehouse of a castle. He is given a stone by a maiden which turns Owain invisible and allows him to escape capture. These also appear in Russian mythology, they appear in English folklore, they appear in Egyptian folklore, and there's all different versions of how exactly these function, how they're created, and what they do. There's even one associated with Aleister Crowley, where supposedly he placed the seaside town of Hastings under an enchantment. he was living in Hastings at the end of his life, and the supposed enchantment, this curse, compels anyone who has lived in Hastings to always return there, no matter how far away they move or for how long they are gone. And the curse can only be broken by taking a stone with a hole running through it from the Hastings beach, like one of these natural holy stones. But I digress. In cunning work, in clever work, in some of the traditions that have come over where European stuff has syncretized and blended into stuff here in America, where you get this mishmash of stuff from all kinds of cultures all brewing together and becoming what we would call cunning work or clever work. Again, it has to be a stone with a naturally occurring hole. So this, super not traditional. However, I have seen some really neat variations on this. So for example, fulgurites. And I have one here. I actually have it for this purpose. This is a fulgurite. What a fulgurite is, and it's a really, really tiny one. There's really nice ones, but this is the one from my witchcraft kit that I take with me when I do stuff. Anyway, a fulgurite is where lightning has struck sand and created glass, which is not technically a stone exactly, but and in some of the older versions of an adder stone, it has to be a glassy rock, because they believe that the saliva made this like glassy substance. So the idea of it being kind of glassy or crystalline actually works really well in some of the traditional versions. And it has a naturally occurring hole in it that I can look through. That naturally occurring hole is where the lightning struck. So I really like using a fulgurite for one of these. Obviously this is a variation. And I have all of these. If you've been hearing something crinkling in my hand while I'm talking, that's because of this. These are the naturally occurring holy stones that I have gathered over the last 10 years, I guess. And there's a lot of them in here. Some of them are bigger holes than others, but you can see the hole in it. And these are just found in nature. Generally near water. There are certain areas in the United States where a lot of them can be found. Good example. And I kind of collect them so that if somebody needs one, I have one to give to a student. I've included them in, at one point, everyone who is at a certain level on Sanctum's Patreon rewards got a bone casting set with a bunch of tools in it and instructions on how to use them. I sent everybody one then. So I just collect them. But why I said that this might actually not be as big of a departure as we think, it's a departure from the idea of the adder stone. It may not be a departure from the idea of using a circle in order to have some kind of divinatory insight, to increase second sight, because of things we've found in burial sites. We've found circles of bone. And we don't know exactly what they're for, but that is one theory, that maybe they're being used as some kind of a seeing enhancing thing. Now I think bone is absolutely naturally occurring, and the hole that is in this bone is naturally occurring, and that we don't always have to follow exactly as tradition dictates to create a magical tool. The idea here is you need a naturally occurring hole in something naturally occurring in order to give you special powers, special insight. I use mine not for legal gain, as in some of the reported druidic uses, but more like in the one Welsh tale, where I use it to be able to see that which would be concealed from me. I use it to see things that don't want me to see them. Now I already have some naturally occurring second sight as it is, but this enhances it, and that's what I've programmed it to do, and that is what it does for me, as well as connecting me with Yen's tool, which he uses to command the spirit world. So one causes enhanced sight of the spirits, and one causes increased command of the spirits, and the two tools are tied together. All right, additionally, there are so many things that enhance the ability to see the spirit world. Black mirrors, for example, which I know we went over in some of the necromancy videos, and one of these days, if you'd like, I'll film making one. But also something that we refer to in my practice as a spirit trap. This is a spirit trap. So it is a naturally occurring double terminated crystal, ideally with this shape, these flat planes. It does not have to be as clear as this. This was quite expensive. I've seen some really beautiful ones that are more occluded. It just has to be clear enough that you can see through it. That's the idea. And the idea is that you wait until you can see the crystal. Try this again. The idea is that you walk around using this as a seeing stone, because it is a naturally occurring stone that you can see through, until you see what you're trying to trap, and then you trap it in this. This one has been cleansed. The thing that was trapped in it is not in it anymore. It has been negotiated with and then released, which is generally what we do. We trap something and then we're like, hey, let's negotiate your release in exchange for you leaving these people alone. And that is what we used to do. We haven't been doing it very much anymore because we moved way away from where our business was. That's fine. I'm retired. Anyway, this is not a witch's eye exactly. This is certainly not an adder stone, but it is used in a similar way to give you an idea of variations that you can have on this concept. Do I think that you could find an adder stone as described by like this writhing mess of serpents that will swim against the current in the river? I don't know. I try not to be dismissive of concepts from mythology because I obviously haven't seen everything yet. I've not been everywhere. I don't know what used to be possible and we knew the secrets of and what we don't anymore, but I certainly wouldn't think that it would be likely. So if you are trying to stick to something from traditional folklore, look for a stone that water has formed a natural hole in. If you are trying to stick to the idea of using something to see the spirit world more clearly, there's so many different ways that you can do that, and I don't think you have to stick to tradition for it to be effective. All right. I think that answered the question. I hope so. If you have any other questions for Ask a Witch, please be sure to send them to us. You can leave it in the comments below. You can send them to us in any of the methods that I mentioned earlier. And please remember to check us out on Patreon, because patrons do gain access to exclusive content and some pretty cool rewards. I've actually been thinking that maybe I should start filming quick little videos saying what the rewards are for our patrons from month to month. I don't know if you'd be interested in seeing that. Let me know. Thank you all for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe, and be safe out there, everyone.